General, do you believe that ISIS can be defeated or destroyed without addressing the cross-border threat from Syria? And is it possible to contain them?
Let me start from where you ended and end up where you started. It is possible to contain them, and I think we've seen that their momentum was disrupted, and that's not to be discounted, by the way, because it was the momentum itself that had allowed them to find a way to encourage the Sunni population of western Iraq and Nineveh province to accept their brutal tactics and their presence among them. So you ask, yes, the answer is they can be contained, not in perpetuity. This is an organization that has an apocalyptic end-of-days strategic vision, and which will eventually have to be defeated. To your question, can they be defeated without addressing that part of their organization which resides in Syria? The answer is no.
What happened in this country on 9/11, 2001? When you ask the question about should Americans see this as any kind of a threat, imminent threat, or what's the issue, this is in Iraq, I doubt if there were many people that would have thought there was much of a threat the day before 9/11. Now, that happened a few years ago. This country is far better prepared today in every way for this. But terrorism is not new to the world. The sophistication of terrorism and ideology that the general was talking about, married now with resources now, presents a whole new dynamic and a new paradigm of threats to this country. The sophistication, technology, money, resources, all of that is different. And we can't ask the question of ourselves as leaders who have responsibility for the security of this country, then, well, is it that big a deal? I mean, they're far away. We don't have that luxury. Every day, the intelligence community of this country and the leaders, regardless of who the administration is, or who the Secretary of Defense is, or who the chairman is, deals with this every day, that we don't want to face that again, ever. 9/11 or any part of it. So we have to look at this, Jim, from the reality of what's out there, but also what could be out there and what could be coming. And is this a long-term threat? Sure, it's a long-term threat.
Isn't the calculation, though, that ISIL presents a 9/11 level threat to the United States?
Yeah. Jim, ISIL is as sophisticated and well-funded as any group that we have seen. They're beyond just a terrorist group. They marry ideology, a sophistication of strategic and tactical military prowess. They are tremendously well-funded. Oh, this is beyond anything that we've seen. So we must prepare for everything. And the only way you do that is you take a cold, steely, hard look at it and get ready.
Well, the immediacy is in the number of Europeans and other nationalities who have come to the region to become part of that ideology, and those folks can go home at some point. It's why I have conversations with my European colleagues about their southern flank of NATO, which I think is actually more threatened in the near term than we are. And nevertheless, because of open borders and immigration issues, it's an immediate threat. That is to say, the fighters who may leave the current fight and migrate home. Longer term, it's about ISIL's vision, which includes, I actually call ISIL, here we go, right? ISIS, ISIS, because it's easier for me to remember that their long-term vision is the Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Sham. And Al-Sham includes Lebanon, the current state of Israel, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Kuwait. If they were to achieve that vision, it would fundamentally alter the face of the Middle East and create a security environment that would certainly threaten us in many ways.
One terrorist with one nuclear weapon could unleash massive destruction. Al-Qaeda has said it seeks a bomb and that it would have no problem with using it. And we know that there is unsecured nuclear material across the globe. One nuclear weapon exploded in one city be it New York or Moscow, Islamabad or Mumbai, Tokyo or Tel Aviv, Paris or Prague, could kill hundreds of thousands of people. And no matter where it happens, there is no end to what the consequences might be for our global safety, our security, our society, our economy, to our ultimate survival.
Look, we are vigilant and constantly monitoring potential risks of terrorist attacks. And I think that the men and women in our intelligence agencies, as well as the FBI, have done a terrific job, and Department of Homeland Security. But the risk is always there. And obviously on a seminal event like the 10th anniversary of 9/11, that makes us more concerned. It means we've got heightened awareness. The biggest concern we have right now is not the launching of a major terrorist operation, although that risk is always there. The risk that we're especially concerned of right now is the lone wolf terrorist, somebody with a single weapon being able to carry out wide-scale massacres of the sort that we saw in Norway recently. When you've got one person who is deranged or driven by a hateful ideology, they can do a lot of damage, and it's a lot harder to trace those lone wolf operators. So we're spending a lot of time monitoring and gathering information. I think that we generally have to stay vigilant. There may be a little extra vigilance during 9/11. On the other hand, keep in mind the extraordinary progress we've made over the last couple of years in degrading al-Qaeda's capabilities. They are a much weaker organization with much less capability than they had just 2 or 3 years ago.
Top Republican now in the Senate, one of the staunchest supporters of a military strike on Damascus, sounding the alarm. Lindsey Graham said the following, quote, "I believe that if we get Syria wrong within 6 months, and you can quote me on this, there will be a war between Iran and Israel over their nuclear program. My fear is that it won't come to America on top of a missile. It'll come in the belly of a ship in the Charleston or New York harbor," end quote.
Russia's actions are a problem. They don't pose the #1 national security threat to the United States. I continue to be much more concerned when it comes to our security with the prospect of a nuclear weapon going off in Manhattan.
There's a report that came out over the weekend, possibly Americans living here have joined the al-Shabaab movement in Somalia, are fighting clearly as if they're al-Qaeda terrorists. Right. They're allowing Muslims to walk out of the mall. And if you cannot prove you're a Muslim, you are shot and killed on sight. Right. Now, this American connection, how real is it that Americans could have gone to Somalia and joined the fight that we're watching unfold in Nairobi?
They're doing two things in our backyard, radical Islamic groups. They're trying to recruit people to hit us fifth column movements, to get radical Islamic terrorists, American citizens, to join their cause to hit us here at home, and actually recruiting people to go overseas to the fight. They're doing both in our backyard. There's a perfect storm building for this country to get hit.
There's a perfect storm building for this country to get hit.
We got a weak president, a war-weary public, emboldened enemies, shaky allies, and a dysfunctional Congress. We're reducing our intelligence capabilities to pick up these attacks. We're sending all the wrong signals to our enemies and friends alike, and they're recruiting in our own backyard. What you saw in Boston could be our future. What you saw in Kenya could come back to us. We're letting our guard down when it comes to dealing with the radical Islamic threat in our own backyard.
Fox News confirms that an American has been killed in Syria and that American was fighting with the terror group ISIS. His name was Douglas MacArthur McCain. You cannot make this up. And he described himself as a slave of Allah. The FBI is tracking dozens of cases involving Americans who have been traveling from the United States to Syria, but the system does not catch everyone.
Within the last hour, a senior law enforcement official confirmed to Fox News that the American citizen killed in Syria was known to the U.S. government and his affiliation also with ISIS. Fox News is told that the family of Douglas MacArthur McCain of San Diego, California, has also been notified. Evidence of his death, including a photo of his American passport, was first reported by the Free Syrian Army, which is fighting against ISIS for control of eastern Syria. On Twitter in June, he told his ISIS contact that he would soon be meeting them in that country, and as his radicalization deepened, he changed his name and he also adopted this moniker, Slave of Allah.
It's ideological. It's not political. It's religious in many cases. So yes, it's going to be a very long contest.
These ISIS terrorists are the evil of all evil. Am I right?
Oh, they are the antichrist of terrorist organizations.
I want to thank.
Christian God is the one and only true living God, the creator of heaven and the universe. Jesus Christ is God. Jesus Christ is God. Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Jesus Christ is the Son of God.
I agree.
You are antichrist because you said Jesus Christ is the Lord.
Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth.
God Almighty, Jesus Christ, created heaven and the universe. Jesus Christ created heaven and the universe.
No, that's okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Now, I have to admit that I've actually met that guy before. That's true. That's a couple of years ago, and he had the same line. He needs to update his material.
Clad in a black turban with the humble bearing of the most respected imam, he appeared in an ornate mosque in Mosul.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
But this was no man of peace.
You should take up jihad to please God and fight in His name.
This video from early July purportedly shows Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the mysterious leader of ISIS, declaring a new caliphate, an Islamic state in Iraq. Al-Baghdadi's grandiosity was striking.
Everything about the caliph's outfit is meant to evoke the early Islamic empire and the rulers that governed it. He didn't just come out to say hello to his followers, he came out to say, I am the new leader of the entire Muslim world.
This from a man who had kept such a low profile, he was known as the Invisible Sheikh.
There are rumors that this is a guy who used to cover his face even when meeting with some of his own people, someone who took extraordinary precautions when it came to his own security.
Al-Baghdadi was thought of as little more than a local thug when he was captured by U.S. forces in Fallujah about a decade ago. When the Americans released him from Camp Bucca in Iraq, he turned to the camp commander with a chilling message.
He looked over to us, and as he left, he said, "See you guys in New York."
One of Oklahoma's senators says the rise of ISIS and other violent terrorist groups is putting our country in a dangerous position.
They're crazy out there, and they are rapidly developing a method of blowing up a major U.S. city, and people just can't believe that's happening. Yes, it's really significant what's happening.
Guarantee you. In fact, I would bet my life on the fact your last guest just said about ISIS coming into America. I would guarantee you they're already here. I have worked in the desert, and I have caught these people before, and I've seen Korans, prayer rugs, you name it. They're already here.
Yeah, we want an end to police brutality. We want the officer Darren Wilson arrested. We're here for Mike Brown, and we're not going to let outside infiltrators come in and destroy our good movement.
When you say outside, when you say there are agents inside the crowd,
they are intentional provocateurs.
Who are they? Who are you accusing?
They've been here every day to try to provoke the police to attack us. Movement. We can't allow this movement to be destroyed. We are here for justice.
Who are you suggesting these infiltrators are?
Look, all I'm telling you is that they're infiltrators. I can't give you any more information than that, but they're here and they're provocateurs. They've tried it every night, and I'm determined with the forces that we are working with that we would not allow it, even if I have to risk my life. I'm not going to see women and children out here hurt, and I'm not going to see the tide turned against us and move in the favor of the police. Now, that's not right. That's not right. We want to exercise our constitutional rights and act like we civilized and got some sense. Provocateur. He's here to provoke the police and get them to attack us. He's not with us. He's a plant. I don't know who he's planted by, but he's not with us. He's here to make this look bad, and we don't want to make it look bad. I want to tell you that the message tonight, it was tense, but it ended in peace. And we'll be back to demonstrate in the future. And we don't need no National Guard. We don't need all of that. We don't need all of that. We need community volunteers to come out here and keep the peace. We need more men and people to step up to keep the peace. These kids will listen to us. They'll listen to me. But we got to be willing to step up. And that's why I'm a lawyer. I'm not no security man. I'm putting my life on the line because I'm not going to see it happen tonight.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was, but I wanted to get his confirmation.
May I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
And tragically, the only member who got close was Jack Brooks, and he was stopped by the chairman. But the truth of the matter is that, yes, you do have those standby provisions, and the plans are there, and the statutory emergency plans are there, whereby you could, in the name of stopping terrorism, apprehend, invoke the military, and arrest Americans and hold them in detention camps. In times of passion and in times of great fear, what to the eyes of the person and the mind of a person in time of relative peace and stability seem impossible become very real, very logical, very possible.
Greta, good to be with you.
Catherine, just reporting very disheartening news. Douglas McCain, an American fighting for ISIS, but NSC gives us a travel warning and doesn't want to say that he's working with ISIS or was working with ISIS.
Douglas MacArthur McCain is an adopted name. And when you're looking at now 2 in a week, the Brit who murdered James Foley, and now an American, you've got to recognize, I think, that the State Department and our Department of Homeland Security and our immigration folks and the FBI would be concerned. There appear to be a lot of Westerners. And as Catherine just reported, we really don't know how many there are. And the estimates vary widely from 300 plus to 3,000 plus.
But in this whole travel alert business, remember the guy who had the underwear bomber? He must have been on. I mean, there's so many ways to get past these no-fly lists.
There's a lot more of them now than there were back when Richard Reed was doing his thing and the underwear bomber as well.
Into Detroit.
But the system has improved. But as everybody acknowledges, it is not foolproof. There are ways to evade it. And one would think that given their sophistication, the folks running ISIS recruiting know how to do it. In other words, if you fly to Turkey, or if you fly to Greece and then motor to Turkey, and then go from Turkey into Syria to become part of ISIS or ISIL or whatever they're calling themselves this week, you may not be in the system when you come back out. And so we have to be very concerned about what's happening with these radicalized jihadists coming back to the United States, just like the Europeans.
Flying to Montreal and walking across the border.
They've been called a diabolical enemy of the United States. Now, the feds are warning local police departments about ISIS, that group could retaliate for American airstrikes with attacks right here at home. So, will Americans support military action to take out ISIS?
Well, federal authorities are now warning police agencies that airstrikes in Iraq could provoke retaliatory attacks here at home by the Islamic militant group ISIS as they spread their reign of terror. This as U.S. intelligence officials say the group wants to establish cells outside of Syria and Iraq. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live with more on this story this morning. Good morning, Catherine.
Well, good morning, Martha. Even before the Foley execution video was posted online last week, U.S. intelligence officials briefed reporters here in Washington. And what they said is that there is evidence that once foreign fighters have left Iraq, they have started ISIS cells outside of that country. They also told reporters it is a mixed picture, according to these officials, with some operatives taking the initiatives to start up operations while others were tasked by the ISIS senior leadership. So there is evidence of ISIS cells outside of Iraq and Syria, and you need to bear this in mind as you listen to the White House spokesman, who seemed to choose his words very carefully at Monday's briefing.
We are concerned about the threat that is posed by ISIL, but it is the assessment, as stated by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, by the intelligence community, that there currently is not an active plot underway to attack the U.S. homeland by ISIL.
It's important to note that there is a very important distinction between what the White House spokesman said about an active plot and Americans who, according to the FBI, are more than 100 who they believe have traveled to Syria to fight alongside jihadists like ISIS, Martha.
Yeah, that's a huge issue here. What warnings are being given to local authorities about all of this at this point?
Well, Martha, Fox News confirming that at the end of last week on Friday, a joint bulletin was sent by Homeland Security and the FBI to local, state, and federal law enforcement, warning that there could be retaliation here in the U.S. by ISIS sympathizers for airstrikes in Iraq. While the bulletin said there was no credible evidence of a plot, it warns, quote, it is difficult to predict triggers that will contribute to HVEs, that's the acronym for homegrown violent extremists attempting acts of violence. Lone wolf offenders present law enforcement with limited opportunities to detect and disrupt plots, which frequently involve simple plotting against targets of opportunity. Today, we were expecting a briefing from the nation's top counterterrorism official to mark the 10th anniversary of the National Counterterrorism Center. This was the group that was set up after 9/11 specifically to be a hub for threat assessment, but that was postponed at short notice just within the last hour, citing a conflict in the scheduling, Martha.
Interesting. Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI are warning that U.S. airstrikes against the terror network in Iraq could provoke retaliation by ISIS supporters right here in the United States. Fox's own Catherine Herridge, she's standing by in Washington with the very latest details on the threat that ISIS poses right here to our homeland. Catherine, pretty scary.
Well, that's right. Today, the State Department describing the ISIS threat as real and direct.
They, of course, have threatened to attack the homeland. We take those threats very seriously. And I think what you're seeing here is a response to our growing concern about the counterterrorism threats.
4 days after this execution video of journalist James Foley was posted online by ISIS, the joint FBI Homeland Security Bulletin was issued, warning there could be retaliation in the U.S. by ISIS sympathizers for airstrikes in Iraq. Lone wolf offenders present law enforcement with limited opportunities to detect and disrupt plots, the bulletin says, which frequently involve simple plotting against targets of opportunity. The bulletin also warning that ISIS will continue to use hashtags to spread its propaganda. This strategy was used over the weekend to piggyback on the social media traffic from the California earthquake. Terrorism analysts tell Fox News sympathizers in the U.S. who are part of the digital jihad are the wild card.
I think the threat coming from ISIS is very serious, is strategic. It does not mean that the organization is in control of what jihadists can do in the United States. So we have to be very careful. ISIS direct cells are one thing. ISIS supporters that we cannot really comprehend or understand is something else. And this is where the serious strike may come from.
An investigative source confirms to Fox News that a 26-year-old American woman, an aid worker from the West Coast, is believed to be another American held hostage in Syria tonight. The source provided no other details, citing concerns for this woman's personal safety shot.
So we've confirmed tonight that the U.S. is flying missions over Syria now, with both manned flights as well as with drones. And the White House earlier said it may decide to hit terror targets with or without Syria's permission, because Syria is saying they would view that as an act of aggression. So what is the mission here? How far should we go? And what if Syria decides to shoot back? Lieutenant General Tom McInerney is a Fox News contributor and with me now. General, what should the mission be?
The mission should be, as Secretary Kerry said and Secretary Hagel alluded to last week, is to destroy ISIS or ISIL or IS. Destroy them, not push them back, Megan. Destroy them. Let's have a 30-day air campaign, 200 targets a day, 24/7, and I assure you there won't be much left of ISIS. But we seem to be very reluctant. I disagree with Andy that it's our problem. It is part of the Middle East problem, and that clearly they have the indigenous forces on the ground that can support that air campaign. But as people remember in Desert Storm, we had a 38-day air campaign, and there was a 100-hour ground campaign. When we went in against Saddam Hussein in Operation Iraqi Freedom, we had a simultaneous air and ground campaign, and we still defeated a far more formidable force than ISIS is today in 23 days.
So there's not much question that that our military could do it, could take ISIS out if they are given the order to do it. But the question I ask you is the same one I asked Andy. There are many in this country, you mentioned Desert Storm under President George Bush the Elder. There are many, especially on the left in this country, that believe if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have faced 9/11, that we have antagonized these groups over the course of our own history to make them hate us. And if we go, this is their theory, and if we go in a place like Syria and start bombing there tonight, this week, or in the near future, we will create more hate and we will make more targets out of ourselves and our children.
Baloney. Look, Megan, radical Islamists are coming after us no matter what we do to them. That ideology is evil as Nazism, fascism, and communism. And most of the people talking about this do not have any idea what that ideology says. And we're infidels, and they intend to expand globally, to have a global caliphate. The fact is all this other stuff that we are inducing them to come after us has no meaning whatsoever once you understand the ideology we're fighting. I agree with Andy. The United States Army still hadn't figured it out because they're calling Fort Hood, Major Nidal Hassan, a workplace violence. That was radical Islam. And until we as a nation understand that this is who we are fighting, and we're caught in the middle between a fight between moderate Islam and radical Islam, let's let them defeat it. We will help them, but let's not do the primary driving. No matter what we do, they're going to come after us. And if we let ISIS expand and own the Arabian Peninsula, then they're going to be a far more formidable threat, and they will be here. And they'll be here maybe this 9/11. I don't know, but we better be much better prepared than we were for Benghazi because of the political narrative. There was an election. So, Osama bin Laden was dead, GM was alive. That's the wrong narrative.
Got it. Lieutenant General Tom McInerney, good to see you tonight.
Thanks, Megan.